So in breaking news, the Supreme Court has handed President Trump another legal win. CNN has exposed House Republicans with a new shocking poll. And James Comey, he's on MSNBC playing the victim.
I mean, look, this has been a historically unproductive Congress so far. I mean, it's basically bizarro land compared to where we were during the first Trump administration. So laws signed by a president since 1953 at this point of presidency. Look, the fewest on record through this point. There have only been 5. Get it? 5 laws actually passed by this Congress and then signed into law by the president. Compare that to 2017 when you actually had 35 by this point, which was the most on record. So it's not much of a surprise that this Congress is struggling to actually pass legislation, because the fact is that has been the rule of the game so far, where they just really haven't been able to pass anything. And the fact that they'll actually be able to pass something, well, it's a minor miracle by some accords.
Now, if you've been watching recently, you know I've been very critical of Congress, and I'm going to continue to be, because this is ridiculous. Now, one could argue the reason why President Trump hasn't been able to sign more bills is because he's trying to wrap everything under the one big, beautiful bill, which if you were to break it all down, that might be at a minimum 5 separate bills that he could have signed at different points of this year. And so I guess that's a worthy argument. But overall, what really does Congress do at the end of the day? In fact, when you compare their productivity and their output to the president, it's just no comparison.
So, you know, if Congress has been historically unproductive, Donald Trump has been historically productive. What are we talking about here? Well, if you can't pass a law, why don't you just sign an executive order? That's what Donald Trump's been doing. So Trump executive orders at this point. In 2017, it was just 36. Look at the number now. Holy Toledo, 152. That is the most on record for any president at this point in a presidency, dating back since at least the FDR administration. Indeed, if you had this 152 and Donald Trump didn't sign a single other one, that itself for the entire year would be the most since FDR. And of course, we still have, what is that, 6, 7 months to go? So the bottom line is Congress, historically unproductive, but Donald Trump has been historically productive because he signed all these executive orders. You can do the quick math. I mean, what is that, 4 or 5 times as many this term than he had in his first term? Holy cow.
You see, that's exactly what you would want from your president, regardless of their party affiliation, okay? If it was Kamala Harris, I would hope she would have signed that amount of executive orders, because you know what that means? They're actually doing something every day, okay? Unlike what Joe Biden was up to over the past 4 years. Now, here's the other idea that jumps out at me is, what the heck is Mike Johnson doing exactly? Because if I compare his performance to Nancy Pelosi, I know there's no comparison. In fact, I don't think I'm the only one that feels this way. Take a look at this clip.
Who Republicans trust more if these groups disagree on an issue? Donald Trump or the GOP leaders in Congress? Just 22% say the GOP leaders in Congress. 58%, that's a very large number, say Donald Trump. So the bottom line is, yes, Congress is struggling, but Donald Trump is thriving in terms of getting his agenda enacted, and that is why Donald Trump is going to be pushing these Republicans very hard in order to get this budget passed.
Okay, so I believe the numbers speak for themselves, which is why this week the president will be visiting Congress to actually talk to House Republicans to make sure that they do pass the big, beautiful bill and send it to the Senate. And so we'll see if they are successful in that regard. Now, speaking of success, let's go to our next story. This is breaking news. Supreme Court has sided with President Trump, allowing him to revoke the temporary protected status of almost 500,000 migrants. Take a listen.
Breaking news, a win for the Trump administration as the U.S. Supreme Court says deportations of Venezuelans can continue for now. In a decision just announced, the highest court says the administration can strip more than 300,000 Venezuelan migrants of temporary protected status. So that means deportations can once again ramp up. A federal judge had blocked an ending of the program that allowed the migrants to live and work here due to poor living conditions back in Venezuela. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson dissented.
Okay, so this is a huge legal win for President Trump. Great news on this Monday morning. And the fact of the matter is, the left is claiming that this is another situation where President Trump is undermining humanitarian protections, and SCOTUS is aiding him in his, I guess, relentless effort to target illegal migrants. I mean, I'm just telling you their thinking here, but let me deliver the truth. The Supreme Court's decision reinforces the executive branch's authority to manage immigration policy, meaning what? Stop allowing lower court judges to usurp the president of the United States and his decision making. Also, TPS was designed as a temporary measure, and extending it indefinitely contradicts its original intent. Now, here's what the spokesperson from the Department of Homeland Security, Tricia McLaughlin, had to say. Take a listen.
What's interesting about this is this was an 8-1 decision. Yep. The only person who voted against it, had a dissenting opinion in the Supreme Court, was Ketanji Brown Jackson.
That's right. We got Kagan, we got Sotomayor. And John, it's pretty unusual for the Supreme Court to really rule 8-1, and especially in the Trump administration's favor. But I will say that this is such a win for the American people. What this program did was really exploit the legal immigration system. We talk a lot about how Biden broke the border, but he also broke the legal immigration system. MS-13 gang members, Tren de Aragua, known terrorists, convicted murderers, human rights abusers, they all came in using this parole program. And we really have to not just look at the border, but also our legal immigration protocols and making sure we reinstitute integrity into them and that we're actually vetting the people who are coming into this country. And so this ruling is going to make the American people safer.
Just for folks at home who, so that they can know how many people came in, here's the stats: 110,000 Cubans, 211,000 Haitians, 93,000 Nicaraguans, 117,000 Venezuelans, for a total of 531,680. I assume that you'll start the deportations?
Absolutely, John. That'll happen immediately. This administration doesn't rest on their laurels. We get going. We know the American people's mandate is to get these people out of the country.
So a couple of it.
Now, it's no secret that Democrats want you to feel some level of sympathy for the 500,000 migrants that might get deported back to their homeland. And I say might because, again, on an individual basis, they can sue the Trump administration once again, and then an injunction will be issued and they're going nowhere, right? And here's the other thing. Justice Jackson, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Why is she the only justice to rule against this? I just don't understand it. Now, maybe you can help me understand, because in this next clip, CNN explains the thinking behind the plaintiffs who brought this lawsuit to begin with. Take a listen.
Challengers argued that she was doing this in part because she was motivated by racial and political hostility. Now, this is just the latest in a series of challenges to Trump's immigration agenda. Many of these have actually reached the Supreme Court in an expedited manner. So this is a small W win for the administration. So the administration can start to proceed with rolling back some of these protections. We should also expect that litigation over this question will continue.
So what she was quoting there is the plaintiffs accusing Kristi Noem, because she's the one that actually officially executed the order, being, I guess, racially and politically motivated. Okay. So is it fair to say that at a minimum, Mayorkas was politically motivated as well? I mean, he didn't do anything. He just let people cross the border illegally. So why would he do that? Why would he allow the law to be broken? For political reasons? Where's his accountability? And speaking of accountability that never happens, Dr. Zeke Emanuel makes an appearance on Morning Joe this morning and exposes exactly what we already knew and what majority of Americans believe, which is that President Biden had prostate cancer during his presidency. Now, before I even get into the actual diagnosis, I just want to focus on this new scandal, the fact that no one mentioned that the president had cancer. Just think about that for a second. Let's hear it now.
You're an oncologist, obviously. Incredibly respected. You believe that it is likely, just for those just tuning in, you believe it is likely, if this prostate cancer has spread to the bone, that he could have had it for up to a decade, but certainly it's likely. Would it be fair to say it's likely to have had this for at least several years?
Oh, more than several years. You don't get prostate cancer.
So again, I just want to stop you. So this is not speculation. If you have prostate cancer that is spread to the bone, then he's most certainly, you were saying, had it when he was president of the United States.
Oh, yeah. He did not develop it in the last 100, 200 days. He had it while he was president. He probably had it at the start of his presidency in 2021. Yes, that I don't think there's any disagreement about that.
Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is a shocking announcement about the president's diagnosis, and more importantly, the way that it was communicated, which for some reason just happened to be right now. Now, you guys may not like my opinion on this, but I'm going to just let it be known. I believe this was timed. I believe this was strategic to announce this diagnosis publicly. And I believe the people around Joe Biden is using him to their own benefit. In fact, I would argue this is elder abuse at some level. I don't think he has the mental faculties to make these critical decisions. That's just me personally. And the shocking announcement now creates more questions. For example, who made the decision in regards to not disclosing that the president had cancer? I mean, I think that's just crazy. Now, CNN is not taking the timing of this announcement very well. Let me show you an example of that. Take a look.
Is just extraordinary. We know from the statement from his personal spokesman that Biden learned of the diagnosis on Friday. Well, what was the biggest Biden story on Friday? It was the release of those audio excerpts from his conversations with Robert Hur back in 2023. This was the audio that Axios obtained, almost certainly from the Trump administration, showing memory lapses. And you heard a lot of people on Friday talking about that audio being hard to hear, even excruciating to hear. Biden showing his age on those audio tapes that had never been heard by the public until now. So on the day that story was breaking, Biden was facing this personal news. At least that's according to the statement from his personal spokesman. So you have that as one element of the timing here. And then you have, as you and Paul just acknowledged, this book coming out, one of the biggest political books in several years. Take out our colleague Jake Tapper for a second. This book, no matter where it was coming from, was going to be a very big blockbuster book. And it just so happens two of the best reporters in Washington, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, are the authors of it. It's already a bestseller based on the number of pre-orders. And so this book comes out in 2 days, but some of the excerpts have already come out, and it's reignited this debate in Washington and beyond within the Democratic Party about Biden, about whether he should have run for re-election at all. So it seems to me, Jessica, this debate doesn't end at all, but it is briefly put on pause as a result of today's news.
Now, I'm sure that for once in our lifetime, we can finally agree with what Brian had to say there. The timing of the announcement is highly suspicious. I do not believe that is being hyperbolic. I do not believe that is being disrespectful. I think that's just stating the obvious. And matter of fact, we're talking about the president of the United States. All announcements are scheduled and strategic. Now, Naomi Biden had some words for Jake Tapper and people who are hopping on this train to make money off of Joe Biden's mental decline scandal. She said this: "I just read a copy of this silly book, and if anyone is curious for a review from someone who lived it firsthand, this book is political fairy smut for the permanent professional chattering class, the ones who rarely enter the arena but profit from the spectacle of those that do. Put simply, it amounts to a bunch of unoriginal, uninspired lies written by irresponsible, self-promoting journalists out to make a quick buck. It relies on unnamed, anonymous sources pushing a self-serving, false narrative that absolves them of any responsibility for our current national nightmare." Now, here is Vice President J.D. Vance and what he had to say about this announcement.
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, of course, we wish the best for the former president's health. And, it sounds pretty serious, but hopefully he makes the right recovery. Like, I will say, whether the right time to have this conversation is now or at some point in the future, we really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no, that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him. And why didn't the American people have a better sense of his health picture? Why didn't the American people have more accurate information about what he was actually dealing with? This is serious stuff. And this is the guy who carries around the nuclear football for the world's largest nuclear arsenal. This is not child's play, and we can pray for good health, but also recognize that if you're not in good enough health to do the job, you shouldn't be doing the job.
Okay, so here's what you guys need to know. This is in line with my opinion. Mainstream media broke every principle, every rule, every value to persecute President Trump and at the same time defend Joe Biden. Now they're so scandalous, they're publishing books to make money off of this while acting like they were not complicit. I mean, that is just crazy. This is a reality show. So at the end of the day, no wonder no one believes what they say. And so the next time they're screaming on TV about what President Trump is doing, what they first should be doing is screaming about how they failed to report on Joe Biden's mental decline. And just maybe they can salvage some of their credibility. And so now we move to our next story, which is breaking news. President Trump announced this morning after his phone call with Putin that ceasefire talks are now underway. And Pope Leo has offered the Vatican as a place to negotiate these peace terms. Let's take a listen.
This is interesting, Boris. The tone and spirit of the conversation was excellent. If it wasn't, I would say so now rather than later. So clearly, the U.S. president is indicating that Vladimir Putin is willing to come to the negotiating table, willing to come to the ceasefire table. Well, that was scheduled to happen last week in Turkey, when it was Vladimir Putin himself who suggested a conversation with Ukraine. That, of course, did not happen at a high level. But the U.S. president also goes on to say here that Russia wants to have economic opportunities open with the U.S. That would mean dropping sanctions as well. We do know after this a phone call, which lasted for 2 hours or so, the U.S. president essentially debriefed many European leaders on this. And the president ending his statement here, Boris, with a very interesting thought. He said, the Vatican, as represented by the new Pope, has stated it would be very interested in hosting negotiations. Let the process begin. So we shall see if that ever comes to pass in the Vatican, but certainly interesting that President Trump mentioned that explicitly.
Yeah. Now, if you've been following this story of Putin and Zelensky and Trump back and forth, you know this announcement really means nothing. I mean, just keeping it real based on historical data, just because Putin says he's ready for a ceasefire doesn't mean he physically is ready for a ceasefire. I mean, you could say stuff, that doesn't mean you're going to do it. Right. And so, again, I'm more of the person who at this point, I'm like, I don't want to hear any more announcements. I want to see action. And also in breaking news, the former FBI director, James Comey, cried his way over to MSNBC this morning to defend his actions when he posted the 8647 picture that drew a lot of backlash and prompted the Secret Service to escort him to FBI headquarters for an interview. And of course, he feels he is the victim in this entire situation. Take a listen.
I really thought that I was done. I was in another life. I was a grandfather and an author wearing, sweaters and jeans. And then I went for a walk on the beach and posted a silly picture of shells that I thought was a clever way to express a political viewpoint. And actually, I still think it is. I don't see it the way some people are still saying it is. But again, I don't want any part of any violence. I've never been associated with violence. And so that's why I took it down. So your position, even after all of this, the Secret Service calling you and bringing you in for questioning, is that the phrase, the message on the shells was political speech and is political speech. Yeah, by somebody. I actually didn't think of it as political speech by me, but I thought, what a clever way to express a political view. The shells were the same color for each of the letters, so different colors for the letters. It took a lot of work. Somebody with artistic flair did that, and I have a hard time believing it was anybody with a dark intention, and it certainly was no dark intention on my part, on my spouse's part. Okay, so that is just pathetic from James Comey. And again, I think the end goal here is for him to sell his book. Why else go on to MSNBC? Unless you're trying to make a statement, get attention. And let's just be real here. You want me to believe that the ex-FBI director who had to make some high-profile decisions, worked in a high-stress environment and had access to classified information, he doesn't know what that would mean when posting on social media? Even if he didn't think it had led to, I guess, a backlash, as he would call it, you knew it would get attention because your name is James Comey. Now, of course, he didn't, waste his time. He had to comment on Trump's cabinet and what the current administration might do. Take a listen.
Do you believe Comey should be in jail?
I do.
So she's the head. She sits atop all of the intelligence agencies in this country. And I wonder what you thought and what you think people around the world thought when they saw that.
I hope people know enough about that particular person that they understand where it's coming from. It says something more depressing about the leadership of our current administration. And I just shrug because that's ridiculous.
Does it make you scared?
No.
Why?
Well, it's not my first rodeo. I would hate something like this, or the audit, or all the investigations, to happen to someone who doesn't have my experience, because I look at it and I think there's another one of those. But when it's one of the real problems we have in this country right now is the use of the president's power aiming at individuals who don't have my background or experience.
All right, so that's James Comey doing what all Democrats do, which is lie by telling the truth. It is true that when the federal government targets an average American, they literally have zero resources, capital, or support, or status to fight back against the federal government. That is true. But it's a lie that it's been President Trump who's been guilty at that at the highest level. I mean, do we need to go back down memory lane and remind people that Joe Biden went after the Catholic Church, went after pro-life groups, went after community colleges that were Christian, went after January 6th? Individuals, even individuals who weren't even there on January 6th went to prison, went after conservatives on social media. I mean, we can go on and on and on. I think you guys are getting my point. So this is just peak hypocrisy from the former FBI director. Now, this is why I want to get your guys' opinion in the comments section below, because we talked about a lot, starting with that bombshell poll from CNN at the beginning of this video showing how President Trump is trusted more than House Republicans. So my question for you, do you believe they're going to be able to pass the big, beautiful bill this week? Secondly, James Comey and his excuses. Why is he trying to play the victim? And what is your reaction to the Supreme Court ruling in favor of President Trump? Let me know your thoughts and everything in the comment section below. Now, given that we ended this video with the ex-FBI director, it's only fitting that the next video you should check out is the current FBI director, Kash Patel, who dropped some shocking announcements in his interview with Fox News. If you missed out on that and more stories from yesterday, all you have to do is click on that video because it's coming up right now.